before he and I had got back together, I was dating some doctors. And so I would go and trade sex for prescriptions. I was selling the pain pills at first, you know what I mean? But then I would like take one here and take one there. And before you know it, I'm, addicted to these little blue pills, which became the love of my life.
What type of pill were they?
Roxy 30s.
Okay, yes.
Oxycodone.
Yes.
30 milligrams.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. Ended up, getting like really hooked on those while I was pregnant. And so ended up coming clean to my doctor at about 7 months that I was addicted to these pain pills and that I was taking more than what they had been giving me. And they said, okay, well, we will, we'll put your daughter in the NICU for a couple days and we'll just, watch her, observe. I'm sure it'll be fine. She should be out, a couple days. And so that is not exactly what happened. What happened was, as soon as I had her, they took her from me. They would not let me be in the same room as her. I was not allowed to see her for the first couple days. She actually ended up being in the NICU for 6 weeks.
Wow.
And they had her on phenobarbital for seizures and morphine to wean her off of the pain medication that I was on. That was probably the most devastating thing that has ever happened to me. Like, the guilt and shame.
I can tell just by the way you're saying it, it's still a very tough subject to talk about.
Yeah, it was one of the hardest things in my life. And, I couldn't understand why I couldn't stop using, even for my own daughter. What was wrong with me?
The power of addiction.
I couldn't understand. Mm-hmm.
What's happening, guys? Welcome back to episode 19 of the Tonksy Media podcast. Today's guest I'm super excited to introduce. All the way from Georgia, USA, this girl has lived a very traumatic life, from prostitution to drug dealing to addiction and also prison, up until 8.5 years ago, where she found recovery and a new life following the Almighty God. Please welcome Jamie Toll. Welcome to the podcast, Jamie.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited.
No problem. Look, I come across you. You're obviously in the same network as I am with social media. The recovery addiction sort of network. There's a whole bunch of us now. All over the world, and it's it's a beautiful thing. So look, I just want to hit you with one question straight up. Why did you agree to come on this podcast and share your story?
To share a story of hope, to encourage people and to let people know that no matter what you have been through, that you can literally achieve your dreams and do whatever it is that you set out that you want to do in life, no matter what has happened in your past.
Awesome. Great answer. Cool. All right. So let's take it right back to the beginning, Jamie. Let's hear about the childhood of Jamie Toll, the upbringing, and sort of what led you down the path that you eventually went down.
My childhood, I feel like, was a little different than a lot of other people's childhoods. I moved around a lot. My parents moved a lot. I went to 12 different schools by the time I graduated high school. Actually, by the time I got to high school, I had been to 12 different schools. And, grew up alcoholic father. My mom and dad kind of had a toxic-ish relationship. They got pregnant with me when they were like 15. Wow. And my father was involved with some things. I don't hold it over them because at 15, right? Like, yeah, I mean, I'm 43 and I can barely be a mom, right?
Yep.
So at 15, I'm sure was just wild for them. So my father grew up in Massachusetts, and he was involved with the Italian mob. So they owned a bakery, and they used to rent out the upstairs for the mob to do gambling. So my father was always getting into trouble one way or another.
Yep.
He wasn't a great criminal. And it caused him and my mom, having like a lot of fights. And I saw a lot of things as a child that children shouldn't see. And so it brought me to my very, very first addiction, which was escape. And escape to me was just, basically living a different life than the reality that I was currently in. Whether that was escaping through books, through video games, through writing stories. I used to journal a lot as like a small child. I was always journaling, and I kind of like would make up this different reality so that I didn't have to live in the reality that I was in.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So, so you say you went to 12 different schools. That must have been, like along with your education and things, it must have been a bit scattered all over the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And, people who have this, brain, some people call it a disease, some people don't. This brain issue of addiction, I feel like it is already hard enough for us to feel like we belong, to connect with people, to feel comfortable in our own skin. So going to so many different schools, I felt like I could never make friends or connect with people. And, when we moved, we made like big moves, right? Like it wasn't like we moved down the street. It was like we moved from Massachusetts to Georgia to New Hampshire, to New Hampshire to Florida. You know what I mean? And they were very quick. It generally, yeah, and it generally wasn't like a planned move. It was just like kind of like usually a quick move, because of the reasons we were moving and things. So it was really hard on me, And then by the time I got to high school and made my first group of friends, right? It was the first people who truly accepted me and loved me exactly how I was. And most of them had traumatic past as well. And they were drug dealers and drug users.
Yeah. What was the sort of, so you say you this is high school. What sort of years was this? Sort of, if we can just put into a bit of insight on what sort of gap of years this was. This would have probably been late 80s, early 90s, or
high school was 1994.
Okay, mid 90s. Yeah, right. Yeah. What was the I'm really interested. Obviously being from Australia. I've actually been to America on a work trip when I was 17 to South Carolina. Back then that was before my addiction started. But I'm really intrigued to know what sort of drugs, were around around that time, and what did you start to use and all that.
It started off with just kind of like I call them high school drugs. So it was weed and mushrooms and acid, and I remember going to a party. And they were, passing around weed, and they were drinking these big, they're called Boone's, Boone's Farms. I don't know if you have them, but they were like, it was like colored like beer and wine and these like big bottles.
Okay, yeah.
And so they were like passing them around, and I remember drinking and smoking and being at this party. And I remember I was so nervous because I really wanted to fit in, and I really wanted people to like me. And then, once I started smoking and drinking, all of a sudden something clicked in my brain. And it was like, I was funny and I was charming and people liked me. And I didn't
like you
feel
fit in.
nervous or anxious. Yes. Like, oh, this is what I've been looking for my whole entire life. This feeling, And I can remember one of my best memories was tripping on mushrooms with my two best friends and watching Austin Powers all night long and just like laughing hysterically,
Yeah.
that was when it was fun.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can definitely relate there. And it was the same sort of drugs too. Not so much the mushrooms. I was sort of scared away from those from stories from my dad. He was very anti-drug and never had addictions or anything like that. But he had bad experience on mushrooms when he was young, and sort of scared me away from it. I eventually tried them later on, but yeah, the acid, the weed, ecstasy was a big one also. Over here in Australia, but yeah, okay. So, all right. When did things start to get a bit more ugly, and you start to actually fall into an addiction, I guess?
So it kind of was progressive. For a long time, I was like a functioning addict. Graduated high school with like a 3.2, got into a really good college, graduated college while I was using drugs. I was a cheerleader for the basketball team.
Yeah, wow. Yep.
While I was using drugs, got a degree, all of this. So it was like still in a place for many years where it was somewhat controllable. I mean, sometimes things would get a little out of control, but I was always able to reel them back in. I always worked. But I was always doing something,
escaping reality.
I went through, I went through, different things. Like I went through an ecstasy thing, right? I think for like a whole 5 months, I raved like every weekend. You know what I mean? And it was just like I think I had like dyslexia by the end of that 5 month streak. Everything was like backwards in my brain. It really messed me up. For a while, but I was the girl with the Jenko jeans and the glow sticks, and it was just so fun. You know what I mean? I didn't ever want the party to end. And that was the difference between like me and everybody else. Like everybody else was like, okay, time to go home. And I'm like, no, let's do more.
Yep.
And that was kind of something that like separated me from my friends. And, I did really well. I got some management jobs with my degree, and then, got pregnant with my son, and was, maintained sobriety through that pregnancy.
Yep.
And, was really like, I'm going to be a good mom, and I'm going to do the right thing. And then some things happened in the relationship between me and his father. And, something I realized is that I use relationships just as addictively as I use drugs. So codependency issues and all of these things. I had, food addictions as well, struggled with that on and off, between binge eating to not eating at all,
Oh, wow.
So
Yep.
Always taking everything to one extreme or another.
Yep.
And that was, I feel like that's like a regular trait of people who struggle with addiction.
Definitely, yeah. It's like a chemical imbalance in your brain, hey? It's like, it's either crazy hard or not at all, It's... Yeah. I'm exact same. I am exact same, 100%. But yeah, continue, sorry.
So my kid's father ended up going to jail, and I was trying to manage everything on my own. I was working as a waitress at the time at an Applebee's, and I was having my mom watch my son, and I still couldn't pay all the bills working every day at Applebee's. So I kind of got into a different kind of work. I had a girl who worked with me at Applebee's who also worked at a strip club, and she was like, hey, you can come over here and you can make your rent in one night, and I was, kid's dad was in prison and so that was what I thought was a great idea at the time, which wasn't a great idea.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
At that time I thought it was. Yeah. And, the wildest thing, I had so many issues, with self-worth and self-esteem and rejection issues. And when I got this job at the strip club, it was like for the first time in my life, I felt like I was worth something. I was like, well, if these people are going to want to pay me to dance, then I must have some type of value, right? And so that just developed into like this whole kind of like really torturous mind thing that I got into, where when I worked at the club, if I only made $30 on stage instead of making, $100 on stage, or if I only made $5 on stage, you know what I mean? Like that was how I started to calculate and value my worth, which brought me into this very toxic self-hatred cycle, which I feel like was already underlying. But through that, I started to be able to see how I valued myself and how I counted myself worthy, which was completely wrong. But for some reason, I developed this belief system that I was worth what other people thought about me.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, So what age were you around here when the stripping started? And
25.
Okay, yeah, still a very immature mind, you could say, I suppose. Where was the drug level at this point? Is this where things started to sort of go down that ugly road?
Actually, I was still, I had gone back to school. So
Okay.
I was actually like in college as well, taking college classes. And of course, when you work at strip clubs, what do you do the whole time? You drink. And then after work, I would go and I would, try to find some people to do an 8-ball with or whatever. I was doing cocaine pretty heavily then, and it was like, I had like no connection and no friends, which was so interesting for that time. That was probably one of the loneliest times in my life, because it was like you couldn't really get a relationship because who wants to date a stripper?
Yep.
Really, I'm just gonna bring her home to mom,
Yeah.
and then friends, they were there while I had drugs. Sure, they were all around while I had drugs. But as soon as the cocaine ran out, so did the friends. So it was really hard. And through that, I made a lot of connections at the strip club, met a lot of very wealthy men, and I started escorting. So I would, date several different men, and that was basically how I kind of like paid my bills. And in all of this, I'm still in this escape alternate reality, just like I was as a child, right? Because my reality is, oh yeah, I'm dating this guy today, I'm dating this guy tomorrow, I'm dating this guy on Wednesday. You know what I mean? And I'm still living this life that is not even real.
Yeah.
Almost like a different character every day.
Yep.
It was, I don't know how I was able to keep up that whole time, to be honest with you. But eventually I ended up meeting some friends, and they were, into escorting as well. And we started doing some things. I tried to make another career change, decided to go to school for something else. Because I was always trying. I just couldn't seem to get it right, you know.
And I
suppose
that is where the chemical imbalance was. You couldn't find that middle balance point, like just by listening to it. And this has given me a great insight, because I was always that drug dealer that hung out at the strip club that would, giving the strippers the drugs and this and that, and so like it's very, very intriguing to hear from your side of the fence. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely different perspective.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, and so I supported myself like that for a long time. And then eventually I got arrested. It was actually the day before my graduation. I was about to graduate college. I was about to get a certification for massage therapy. And I was really, really excited and went out to go do, to go make some money, and ended up getting busted in Polk County, Florida on a cyber sting. And I got blasted on the news for like 3 days straight. The guy from Dateline was there. It was very humbling, very embarrassing, and really kind of put a halt to everything that I had been doing.
Yep.
And, of course, my family found out what I was doing. And it was probably one of the most traumatic things in my whole entire life that had happened.
Definitely. That would have thrown yourself, everything that you were battling already would have just multiplied by 1,000 for sure. Being publicly humiliated. Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely humiliating. And so I ended up getting a job at a Denny's as a waitress after that, and made another geographical change with my mother. My father had passed away, and so my mom moved to a different state. And, because my son was still small, I went with her. And, again, I'm going to do the right thing this time. I'm going to be a good mom. I really want to do this. And my mom moved, into this neighborhood. And of course, there's a crack dealer that lives next door. And, I get a job waitressing at the Applebee's. And within 2-3 months, I'm working at a multicultural bar that's selling cocaine, out the back door, and I'm dancing on the bar for money, so yep. It was like, geographical change, but guess what? Wherever Jamie goes, there she is.
Yep, 100%.
So, yep. And so just kind of stayed in that like party lifestyle, went from toxic relationship to toxic relationship, trying to fill the void inside of me, right? Trying to keep myself feeling worthy and having, pride and, in all the wrong things, trying to fill my self-worth and self-esteem in all the wrong things and by all the wrong standards. And eventually, me and my kid's dad decided that we were going to get back together. And within a couple weeks, I got pregnant with my daughter, Delilah.
So same father?
So, same father, yes.
Yep.
So at this time, I had gotten a little bit into pain pills. And, before he and I had got back together, I was dating some doctors. And so I would go and trade sex for prescriptions. And this was, of course, before everything was linked, right? So you could be going to several doctors and systems weren't linked.
Yep.
So I was selling the pain pills at first, you know what I mean? But then I would like take one here and take one there. And before you know it, I'm, addicted to these little blue pills, which became the love of my life.
What were they? What type of pill were they?
Roxy 30s.
Okay, yes.
Oxycodone.
Yes.
30 milligrams.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. Yep. So, ended up, getting like really hooked on those while I was pregnant. And it came clean to my doctor because I had a prescription, because I had like a couple things, in my body going on, not major things, but where I was prescribed pain pills, on a low level. And so ended up coming clean to my doctor at about 7 months that I was addicted to these pain pills and that I was taking more than what they had been giving me. And they said, okay, well, we will, we'll put your daughter in the NICU for a couple days and we'll just, watch her, observe. I'm sure it'll be fine. She should be out, a couple days. And so that is not exactly what happened. What happened was, as soon as I had her, they took her from me. They would not let me be in the same room as her. I was not allowed to see her for the first couple days. She actually ended up being in the NICU for 6 weeks.
Wow.
And they had her on phenobarbital for seizures and morphine to wean her off of the pain medication that I was on.
Yep.
And that was probably the most devastating thing that has ever happened to me. The guilt and shame.
I can tell just by the way you're saying it, it's still a very tough subject to talk about.
Yeah, it was one of the hardest things in my life. And, I couldn't understand why I couldn't stop using, even for my own daughter. What was wrong with me?
The power of addiction.
I couldn't understand. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know. I just thought I was pathetic and I didn't have enough self-will and I didn't love my kid enough, and so blamed it all on myself, went home, tried to take the cheap way out and eat a bottle of Klonopin, woke up a few days later, and basically, had to go through the whole defects thing. Baby daddy, he was using heroin, and I hadn't really crossed that bridge yet. I had only messed with pain pills. So he was out there pretty bad. And so we ended up breaking up. And my mom took my daughter. My family was so angry with me. I mean, they did not want anything to do with me.
It's a horrible feeling, hey? Being there myself, for sure.
And that put me into a spiral, but it also brought me to my very first detox. So I ended up going to a detox facility and stayed there for a couple of weeks. Went into a detox and then a 30-day program. Made it about halfway through the 30-day program before I had, one of my friends come pick me up and take me out. And this kind of went through a cycle of 8 different times that I went through detox. And I would go to detox and maybe stay somewhere for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And then every time I would get out and I would say, okay, I'm cured. Now I can use drugs just like everybody else. And that wasn't the case. So every time it brought me back to the same exact situation.
Vicious cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so that, that happened over several years, got myself into some real bad situations, got involved with some really dangerous men who ended up trafficking me, and went through that for a couple of years. And then one day I got arrested. We call this my rescue when I got arrested. And it was just a regular Tuesday night, and I got pulled over, and I had a schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on me, which is just a little bit of everything.
Can you just give
variety
me
pack?
Yeah, an insight on what that actually means? I read it in your bio, and I was just a little unsure.
Sure.
It's obviously a different saying here in Australia.
So schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I think, let's see, I had Xanax, Percocet, meth, weed. Let's see. Xanax, Percocet, meth, weed, and what else? Heroin.
Okay.
And heroin. 5, yes. So just a little bit of everything.
Okay. Yep.
And so the police, I thought that I was like pretty clever. I had it sewn inside of my purse lining,
Yeah.
so I thought that I was safe and I was like pretty smart, but then of course they called the dog and that didn't work. So the dog got me and, and I ended up going to jail.
Wow.
And I went to jail and, I remember going into jail and I had been to jail a couple times, never for anything really major, I didn't really have like a record or anything that I had gotten in trouble for. It was like as long as you don't get in trouble for the next year, then, we'll take it off your record, whatever. So this is my first time having some we call it big boy charges, right?
Yep.
And so I had to go in front of this judge. And I remember the judge looking at me and he said to me, I'm going to put you on a 4-year felony probation. He said, do you understand what that means? And I was like, no. And he said, that means for the next 4 years, you cannot fail a drug test or get in trouble, or you're going to go to prison. And something finally went off in my brain. And I realized I don't know how to do that. And that was the moment that I realized I need to do something different. I don't know how, I don't know what, but something has got to be different. And so I ended up going into a sober living community.
Okay, yep.
So it was very interesting. I live in Athens, Georgia, which is home of University of Georgia. So it's like a small town, big city vibe. I call it crunchy granola, very hippie-ish. And the whole place is basically UGA campus. So the sober living that I was on a big campus. And I walked into a house with 13 other girls, and it was like a, sober sorority type thing. And I was just like, this is so weird. What to think about it. But I knew that there were these women in here who were trying to do the same things that I was. And they told me that they were going to love me until I could learn to love myself.
Yep.
And so I followed their suggestions. And they really just like raised me up and grew me up. At this point, this is 2015.
Okay.
So July 20th, 2015 is my sobriety date.
Wow, congratulations.
And thank you. And I remember walking in there 8 days before my belly button birthday and thinking, lame birthdays from here on out. And that was not the case. That was not the case at all. It was really hard at first, because I didn't have a car. I walked in there, I had 4 shirts, 4 pairs of pants, some panties, a couple bras, a couple pairs of socks, a pair of shoes. Like that's it. I had nothing. Yep. And I was so used to relying on, my body, selling my body to get the things that I wanted. I had to actually go out and get a job. I had to go walk to the bus stop and take the bus to go fill out applications. And it was so humbling,
reality check. Hey, it
this.
was like a full blown reality check. Like, yeah, welcome to the real world.
Yes. Yes. And so, in the sober living, I shared a room. There was, 4 girls to a room, and I had a closet that half of it was mine, and I could put my stuff in it. And, I had my own bed, and it was mine, and it was safe. And I had a bathroom that I could take a shower, and I didn't have to worry about, when I was going to be able to use the bathroom. and there was a kitchen, and there was so much food in it.
The little things, hey.
Yes.
Yeah, unreal. That's a beautiful story. Yeah, yeah. So
Mm-hmm. It was such a peaceful feeling. It was just like so peaceful. And the best thing of it all was that I wasn't alone anymore, right? So I was in this house with these 13 other women on a campus with 160 people trying to get sober, men and women, right? So it was like this whole community. And, I just followed their direction. They told me, you have to go get a job. And by the way, you can't wear that.
Yep.
So they taught you have to take a shower every day. You have to brush your teeth. You have to make your bed. You have to do your laundry. Get a job because you have to pay your rent. And that was something very different for me. But I did. I ended up getting a job too. 2 minimum wage jobs, and was able to support myself. And I took the bus every day, and I became like independent. You know what I mean? It was like I was able to support myself. I became self-supporting. I didn't have a whole lot, you know what I mean, but I had enough for what I needed, and I had friends, and they told me to get a home group. They told me to get a sponsor. They told me to go to meetings. They told me to do service work. And I just simply followed everything that they told me. And I ended up staying on that sober living campus for 3.5 years. In that 3.5 years, I ended up starting my own business. Wow. I ended up becoming a recovery coach for the state of Georgia. I ended up, restoring relationships with my family. I got a car. I saved up enough money to move. I didn't have a car for the first 18 months of recovery, so I understand the struggle.
Oh, definitely,
and my family.
Yeah. Definitely, for sure, yeah.
My family wasn't, it made me like so jealous because some of the girls, their parents would come see them on the weekends and take them to get their nails done and help them with things. And my family was just like, figure it out.
Yeah.
So that was, I began doing steps. I'm a huge advocate for step work, whatever, program you're doing. Step work is amazing. Faith is part of my pathway. Service at 89 Days Sober, I started telling my story. I went to the crisis intervention unit here, which I had been to twice. So it was really cool to be able to go in and speak and say, hey, I used to be here too. I was sitting on that side.
Yeah.
And
very
here
inspiring.
I am now,
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So began speaking out and telling my story. There's just been so many amazing things that have happened being in recovery. When I did move off the sober living campus, I moved just 5 driveways down into where the staff lived. So into these townhouses. So I was still like very protected and connected, but on my own. And I ended up becoming president of the board of directors for that treatment center then.
Wow.
And so that was really awesome to be able to give back in that sense. Started a program at a nonprofit that serves women coming out of prostitution and human trafficking, and started serving there as a recovery coach. And also I created a protocol for massage for people in recovery. So people who are, in a stabilization phase for like MAT meds. So massage for them, trauma-informed massage for women who need to learn healthy touch who have been abused. So we created these protocols, took them to Georgia Council on Substance Abuse and implemented them in these recovery organizations, and started teaching at the local massage school here. So I teach the students at the local massage school how to do this, and they go into the organizations and do it for their clinic hours. So that's really cool because it's like multiplied.
Yeah. Now,
I always feel like
sorry, I just want to ask you something before you continue. So you didn't actually explain when the day that you obviously you follow God, you're a Jesus follower, and you know your life evolves around that sort of path now. When was the big day? When did you see the light? Do you know what I mean?
Yes. So
because there's always a great story
was,
behind this, whoever it may be. Like,
yeah. So it was probably somewhere in between. I have a few moments now.
Okay.
These are very cool. Somewhere in between step 2 and step 3. I want to say it was January of 2016. So I'd been in sober living for 6 months, and my friend brought me to a church, and it was a church like I had never been to because I was brought up Catholic. So I was brought up Catholic, and my friend brought me to an apostolic church, and I had never seen people worship and dance and yell and shout and be so fired up for Jesus. And I was just like, wow, because in the Catholic Church, it is very reserved.
Yeah.
Sit, stand, kneel, so it was just very, very different. And it, like, something inside of me, was really tired of the way that Jamie was running her life. Something inside of me was like, in step 3, it's like, turn my will and my life over to the care of God, right? And it's like, I just got to this point where I was in this perfect position where I was like, I want more of Jesus and less of Jamie. So they did a call for baptism.
Okay.
And it was like my hand just like shut up. Like I'm telling you, I didn't even do it. It just, it just shut up. And so they put me in this freezing cold baptismal pool and, prayed and, we baptized you in the name of Jesus. And I came up and they were like, oh, we didn't get you all the way down. You have to go down one more time. I'm like, this is 30 degrees in here. It's so cold. Put me under again. And it was so wild. After I got out, this group of women came up to me and they put their hands on me and they started praying over me. And it was like their eyes turned like this ice blue color, like
wow.
illuminating when they were praying over me. And they started to tell me things about my past, things that, I needed to let go of, things that I needed to forget about, and that God was going to do something amazing with me, like in the turnaround, and that I needed to focus on God and focus on my future. Don't talk to those people again. Don't go back to that way of life. And it was just incredible to me. Like, and I felt like at that moment, it was like the heavens opened up for me. That was when everything, I'm never going to tell people that following Jesus doesn't come with a cost. You know what I'm saying? I'm never going to be like, oh, follow Jesus and your life is going to be amazing.
No, it's
but
right, yeah.
for that season, God really did open up the heavens for me. And he taught me about faith. And I had this amazing roommate, and she was like, maybe like 10 years older than me. And she taught me, about like reading the Bible, and she taught me about the Holy Spirit, and she taught me about faith. And, I really started to learn, like how to move in faith, how to pray, how to ask, how to build relationship with Jesus, which is something that I never learned growing up, because I learned about, the rosary and these different prayers. Not that there's anything, nothing against Catholics. I think Catholics are beautiful and their churches are beautiful, and, but for me, I just didn't realize anything about the relationship and about the Holy Spirit, and what did it really look like to have the Spirit of God living inside of you.
It's amazing.
And so becoming like in a partnership with Jesus. And so it was just amazing. So I actually did a 4-year discipleship under a deliverance minister, which was so incredible. He was the counselor at the sober living that I went to. So I studied, under him, and he taught me, self-deliverance, and taught me about relationship with Jesus. And there was a couple things, in growing that relationship that were really pivotal. Somewhere, I think it was my 4th and 5th step, which is where you write down your inventory, right? So I had this whole inventory in this notebook, and it was, fear inventory, resentment inventory, and sex inventory in a 5-star notebook, right? And like 3/4 of it full of all of this stuff, right? That I had done. And so go over it with my sponsor. My sponsor says, I want you to take it home and meditate on it and see what God wants you to see in it. And so I take it home, and I remember sitting there, and I remember, saying, God, you want me to turn my will and my life over to you, my thoughts and my actions. You want me to fully surrender to you. But I'm sitting here looking at this 5-star notebook full of all these terrible things that I did. And according to the teachings that I learned growing up in a religious setting, it doesn't look very good for me right here. It doesn't look like you are really happy with the way that I have been living my life. And I really need to know, how do you feel about me? How do you really feel about me? If I'm going to trust you, I need to know, because there's some things that happened where I want to know where you were. Where were you when this happened? Where were you when I was getting trafficked? Where were you when my daughter got taken from me? All of these things. So it was a really heavy conversation, where I was just crying out to know, what is this amazing love of God? What is it, And the next day I went over to my mom's house. I got to go see my daughter, and she was sitting across from me at the kitchen table, and she was 4 or 5. Okay. So her hair is a mess. She's got food all over her face. She's got a broken crayon, and she's just scribbling away. And I am looking at her with this adoration, this love just beaming from every fiber of me, right? Oh my goodness, this is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. And the Lord spoke to me in that moment, and he said, that is how I feel about you. And that changed my life forever. Forever changed my life, because I began to understand how God felt about me.
Yeah. So that sounds like the main, the actual point where everything was lifted, and I literally just got full goosebumps you saying that. It was that moment you just looked at your daughter and seen that, and then had a reflection on yourself and your relationship with God. That's just definitely sounds like the main pivot point there.
Mm-hmm. It was the revelation, and then I just began to be able to hear his voice, to really hear, and I'm not saying it's audible. Sometimes I hear him, but in my inner, with my inner ears.
Yes.
My inner ears,
I know.
right?
I know exactly what you're saying. It happens to me too. It's I've come to the realization that it is your own inner voice, your own inner ear, as you just said, that is speaking to you. I always believed hearing people speak of God, because it was only a couple of years ago that I started to follow. When I found my recovery, and I always was expecting this face in the sky, or because I was far from a Catholic upbringing, far from any type of churchy upbringing. I was complete opposite, but I always pictured this face in the sky, or this loud men's voice in my head. But it's so much more than that, and I've actually still on the crawl, but I'm definitely on the way. That's for sure. So it's amazing speaking to somebody like yourself that's got such a horrific background, but such a great pivoting point because of the love of God, you know?
Yes. And, God will never let anything come upon you unaware, right? So the intentional listening, I'm reading this amazing book right now from Marty Darracott it's called Echo Heaven. And it teaches about like fine tuning to hear God's voice. And I've been able to do some like interesting exercises that and like really like this intentional listening. So it's been really, really cool. And then like just like partnering with God, you know what I mean? Like the way that I created the whole recovery massage, right? Like I was just one day I was like, God, I'm really passionate about recovery and I'm really passionate about massage. And I think that we should make this protocol called recovery massage and we should do it on people in early recovery so that they don't relapse and so that they can learn healthy touch and so that they can learn that they're worthy of self-care. And then literally like, it just like, I went and I told, somebody that has a nonprofit, and she was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. Here's the money. Set up the room.
Wow.
You know what I mean? It was just like, bam, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
it's
okay.
crazy. It's
and
so crazy once you start to click on, it's like I said, I'm still very early stages of it, I believe, but I can see such a big picture ahead, and it's like, there's a reason that, he's brought you and I together just, straight up, like, but yeah, look, Jamie, we are starting to head towards the end. Is there anything else that you want to add on the end of your story?
I just want to just make sure, let people know that, when you do come into recovery, just like when you come into your walk with Jesus, you want everything to be like perfect and amazing. But there are difficulties that come ahead. I have actually, some of the most difficult things I've been through have been in my later years in recovery. Just finalized a divorce, which was probably the hardest thing I've done in a really long time. You know what I mean? But no matter where you are, like in your recovery walk, like you will have people that will walk with you. And when you get through these hard times, like whatever it is that comes, you will be able to help other people like who are walking on that path. So you will gain wisdom and lessons, and you will not be alone because you will have not only a recovery community, but you will have the love of God and the comfort of the Holy Spirit. And, they will give you the strength to get through whatever it is that you're going through. So you just have to remember to keep going forward. For moms who have not gotten their kids back, I want to just point to this. My son is 19 years old, and he just moved back in with me. I had not had him by myself since he was like 3 years old.
Wow, that's amazing.
And at 19, he comes and moves back in, right? And I am mom.
Wow.
So hearing, so many women who have lost their children, and it's been so many years, 8.5 years in recovery, and this is how long it's taken for my son to come move back in. So even if they grow up, believe me, they will still need you.
Can I just cut in there? Sorry, because that actually hits home a little bit at the moment. And I no doubt my sister will listen to this, but she's in the state that I was born in, Tasmania. I no longer live there anymore, but she's actually going through it right now. She's she found recovery for 3 years. And then she's about 6 months back into heavy addiction. Her partner's gone to jail for drug importation, and the kids, her 4 girls, all under the age of 8, are on the top of the fence of heading to child protection. Mind you, when she was an addict last, before she found recovery, that first time, her kids spent the first, I think, 3 years with child protection. So hearing that advice right there is it's definitely big, and I truly hope she watches this because she's really, really not well at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is, also the guilt and shame that comes with being a mom is so heavy and so hard. I'm not saying it's different for dads, but I know like I can attest for being a mom, it kept me in addiction so much longer. So don't let that guilt and shame keep you out there. Believe that you are worth more. Your kids, you already know that your kids are worth more, but you are worthy of being their mom.
Yeah, excellent. That's awesome advice. You know, have you got any advice for maybe somebody that hasn't headed down the life of drugs, crime, prison, male or female, I suppose, but that's maybe starting to use drugs and stuff. What's some advice you can throw out there for somebody that hasn't lived that life yet?
I would say that keeping your dreams and aspirations in front of you is a better focal point than keeping drugs and alcohol as your focal point. Because there are so many people who are dying. I have lost so many friends, and it is just not safe to use anymore. It's just not safe. It is not safe. And we need you in this army, believe it or not. You are a part of an army, a spiritual army, an army in the kingdom of God, which you believe or not. And we need you, and we need you to help fight and to help pull other people out of the fire. So if you're falling into the fire, you need to get out, because we need you to help pull people out, be the good example, help, set up the programs. If you're falling into these, this drugs and alcohol, and it's just fun, and you're in this stage where you're like, oh, well, this is just fun, it's not a big deal. It is a big deal, because you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know if you might do a bump of cocaine and die of a fentanyl overdose. We just had 8 overdoses at a bar the other week from people doing cocaine.
Yeah. So
it's just not safe, and this is not the time. There are great things that are coming ahead for people. This year, if you will follow the right path and you will follow God, this is going to be an amazing testimony for a lot of people this year.
Amazing. That's such great advice, and I hope it goes a long way and people get something out of it for sure. Last but not least, Jamie, where can people find you? Can you give us a bit of a shout out on your socials?
Yeah, you can find me, Jamie Tall, on YouTube, on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. So just Jamie Tall. I have a pretty big community. If anybody has any experience with gang stalking and interesting things with the spiritual side of meth and the demonic side of meth, you can find a lot of information and a big community of people who have suffered from that on my YouTube. But yeah, it's just Jamie Tall on all platforms.
Excellent. All your links will be in the descriptions. Guys, look, that is Jamie Tall all the way from Georgia, USA. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thank you, Jamie. Really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Glad we finally got to hook up.
Definitely, for sure. Thanks for listening, guys. Cheers.
How do you know if God is talking to you? It says in the Bible, "In loving kindness I have drawn you in." A lot of people think that when God is speaking to them, that he is going to come with a hammer and with lightning bolts and thunder and tell you how terrible you are. I want to tell you a story about my first encounter with the Lord. I was in my active addiction, and I had just finished trading myself for a $20 pill. And the Lord literally came to me and he said, "Can I sit with you? I see that you're lonely." And I thought to myself, God, why would you want to sit with me? Didn't you just see what I did? And he said, "I see that you're hurting. Can I comfort you?" And I was so ashamed wept and thought, God, why would you want to comfort me or be anywhere near me? Don't you see how much I've sinned? And he said, it's not the fact that I hate your sin. It's the fact that when you do these things and you sell yourself for drugs, you're giving yourself to people that don't deserve it.